Ma'am, economy passengers don't stand here. The words landed flat, practiced, and just loud enough to turn heads as the agent slid the ticket back across the counter without looking up. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Jada Sterling didn't reach for the ticket right away. She stood there for a second, still, the low hum of the terminal wrapping around her like white noise, fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished floor beneath her worn heels, a carry-on bag resting quietly by her side. She looked like someone who had just stepped off a long flight, not someone who belonged at the front of a priority line. And that was exactly what the agent saw. You'll need to move to the standard line, ma'am, the woman added, her tone sharper now, glancing briefly at Jada's clothes before looking past her to the next passenger, already dismissing her. A few people nearby shifted, curious. One man adjusted his watch. Another woman leaned slightly to get a better look, the kind of subtle attention that didn't speak but still pressed in. Jada finally picked up the ticket, her fingers steady, her expression unreadable, not offended, not surprised, just aware. She had seen rooms like this before, spaces where decisions were made in seconds, where people were placed into categories without a word. Behind her, the line grew longer. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. A rolling suitcase bumped softly against the tiled floor, the airport loud but somehow distant. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, the agent said again, this time with a hint of impatience, already reaching for the next boarding pass as if Jada had disappeared. But she hadn't. Jada took one small step back, just enough to clear the counter, her gaze lifting briefly to the departure board glowing above, rows of destinations flickering in green and white, flights leaving, arriving, moving on schedule like clockwork. Then her eyes dropped, not in defeat, but in thought. Her hand slipped into the pocket of her coat, slow, deliberate, and when she pulled out her phone, she didn't rush, didn't type frantically, didn't call attention to herself. She simply held it there for a moment, the screen lighting her face with a soft blue glow, her thumb hovering as if timing mattered. Somewhere to her right, a security officer had started to move, not aggressively, just routine, just procedure, the kind of movement that said this situation needed to be managed. The agent exhaled quietly, relieved to move on. Next, she called, her voice regaining its rhythm. But Jada was still there, still silent, still watching the board as if she was listening to something no one else could hear. Then, with a single, almost effortless motion, her thumb touched the screen. Nothing dramatic, no announcement, no shift in posture, just a tap so light it could have been mistaken for nothing at all. And for half a second, everything stayed exactly the same until it didn't. The change was not loud at first, not something people could point to, just a flicker above the gate. A subtle hesitation in the system like a breath held too long. The boarding screen blinked once, then again, the green letters shifting into a frozen line that read processing as if the entire network had suddenly forgotten what it was supposed to do. The agent frowned, tapping her keyboard with quick, practiced strokes, expecting the usual response, a confirmation, a correction, anything, but the screen in front of her did not move. That is strange, she muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else, her tone no longer sharp but uncertain. Behind her, another monitor dimmed, then reset, the soft chime of the system repeating without resolution. A man in line checked his watch, impatient. A woman glanced up at the board, confusion knitting across her face as the departure time flickered and then disappeared entirely. Jada Sterling stood a few feet away now, her posture relaxed, her phone lowered at her side, her gaze no longer on the agent but on the ripples spreading through the terminal, a quiet observation, as if she had seen this pattern unfold before. The security officer who had been approaching slowed his steps, his attention shifting from her to the screens, to the sudden stillness of movement around the gate. We are experiencing a brief delay, the agent announced, forcing a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. But even as she spoke, her voice wavered slightly, because this was not how delays usually looked. Delays came with messages, with codes, with explanations, not silence. Another agent leaned over from the next counter, whispering something urgent, their eyes both flicking to the system panel as if searching for a cause they could name. The overhead speakers crackled, then went quiet, cutting off mid-announcement, leaving behind a hollow pause that made the entire space feel suspended. A child asked his mother why the plane was not boarding, and she did not have an answer. The line that had once been orderly began to shift, people stepping out, checking their phones, refreshing apps that now showed the same word repeated over and over again: delayed, delayed, delayed. Somewhere beyond the glass, the aircraft sat ready, unmoving, its doors still open, ground crew standing in place as if waiting for a signal that never came. Inside the terminal, a supervisor hurried toward the counter, his steps quick, his expression tight with the kind of concern that did not belong to minor inconveniences. "What is happening?" he asked, already reaching for the keyboard, his fingers moving faster, more forceful, but the system did not respond to him either. The agent shook her head, her earlier confidence gone, replaced by something closer to unease. "It just stopped," she said, her voice low. "Now, careful," as if saying it louder might make it worse. Jada shifted her weight slightly, the soft roll of her carry-on wheels brushing against the floor as she adjusted her stance, still silent, still unnoticed by most, yet somehow at the center of a disruption no one could yet understand. The departure board above them flickered again, and this time the change was undeniable, bold letters replacing the schedule, flashing in steady intervals that drew every eye upward: corporate hold. The words unfamiliar to many but heavy enough to quiet the room. The supervisor froze for a fraction of a second, reading it, then reading it again, his face tightening as recognition began to settle in. He looked down at the system, then back at the board, then slowly, almost instinctively, his gaze turned toward the only person in the area who was not reacting, not questioning, not moving at all. Jada Sterling stood there, calm, composed, her expression unchanged, as if the chaos unfolding around her had already been accounted for long before anyone else noticed it. The air felt different now, thicker, charged with something unspoken, and for the first time since she had stepped into that line, no one was looking past her anymore. The supervisor's eyes stayed on Jada for a moment too long, long enough for the agent to notice, long enough for the shift in the room to deepen into something heavier than confusion. "Sir?" the agent asked, her voice uncertain now, almost careful, as if she had stepped into something she did not understand. He did not answer her right away, his gaze still fixed, studying Jada not for what she looked like, but for what he might have missed. Around them, the terminal had changed its rhythm. Conversations lowered into murmurs, footsteps slowed. Even the rolling suitcases seemed quieter against the polished floor. The words "corporate hold" continued to pulse above them. Steady, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The supervisor swallowed, then straightened his posture, adjusting his jacket like a man preparing to speak differently than he had a moment ago. "Ma'am," he said, this time directed at Jada. Not past her, not around her, but at her, his tone shifting from authority to something closer to caution. "Are you traveling on this flight?" It was a simple question, but the weight behind it was not. Jada lifted her eyes to meet his, calm, steady, the same composure she had held from the beginning, the kind that did not need to prove anything. "I was," she replied, her voice even, quiet, but clear enough to cut through the noise around them. The agent blinked, glancing between them, trying to reconcile the woman she had dismissed seconds ago with the sudden attention she was now receiving. There must be some kind of system error. The agent added quickly, her words rushing now, trying to reclaim control. "These things happen sometimes. I can call technical support and have this cleared in a few minutes." But the supervisor did not move toward the phone, did not reach for the keyboard again, because he had already seen something that told him this was not an error. His eyes flicked briefly to the screen, then back to Jada's phone, still in her hand, still dark now, as if whatever had been done had already been completed. A pause settled between them, not empty, but full of realization slowly taking shape. "Can you confirm?" he said carefully, choosing each word with precision. "If this hold was initiated intentionally?" The agent's breath caught slightly, the question landing heavier than she expected. People nearby leaned in without meaning to, drawn by the tone alone. Jada did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze upward once more, toward the board, toward the frozen schedule, toward the aircraft waiting beyond the glass. When she spoke, it was not defensive, not emotional, just factual. Systems like this do not stop without authorization, she said, her voice soft but grounded, the kind of statement that did not ask to be believed, only recognized. The supervisor nodded slowly, the last pieces settling into place. He took a small step closer, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, may I have your name?" The question lingered for a fraction of a second, and in that space, the entire terminal seemed to hold its breath. Jada looked at him, then at the agent, whose earlier certainty had now faded into visible unease, her hands resting still on the counter, no longer moving with confidence. "Jada Sterling," she said. The name did not echo loudly, but it did not need to. The supervisor's expression changed instantly, not dramatically, but unmistakably, recognition passing across his face like a shadow shifting in light. He exhaled slowly, a breath he did not realize he had been holding, and for the first time, he looked at her not as a passenger, but as someone whose presence carried consequence. The agent frowned slightly, confusion deepening, the name not yet meaning anything to her, but the reaction beside her telling her it should. "Sterling," the supervisor repeated under his breath, almost to himself. Then louder, steadier, "Ms. Sterling." And now there was no hesitation in the way he addressed her. Behind them, another system alert chimed, softer this time, but sharper, as if confirming what had already been set in motion. The agent straightened instinctively, her posture tightening, her earlier tone gone completely. I apologize if there has been any misunderstanding," she said, her words careful now, each one placed where it could not offend, could not assume. Jada's expression did not change. She did not nod, did not accept, did not reject. She simply stood there, present, composed, letting the moment unfold without interference. The supervisor glanced once more at the board, then back at her, and in that exchange, something unspoken became clear to him, something that had nothing to do with tickets or lines or boarding priority. "The flight will remain on hold," he said quietly, more to confirm than to decide, and the weight of that sentence settled over the space between them. Jada adjusted her grip on the handle of her carry-on, the soft click of the wheels aligning on the floor, a small, almost insignificant sound in a moment that had already shifted everything. And still, she said nothing more. The words settled into the air like something final, something that could not be taken back, and for a moment no one spoke. The agent's hands, once quick and certain, now rested still against the counter, her fingers lightly touching the edge of the keyboard as if unsure whether she was still allowed to use it. Behind her, the system screen remained frozen, the usual flow of confirmations replaced by a quiet, unresponsive interface that reflected her own uncertainty. "Ms. Sterling," the supervisor said again, softer this time, his tone no longer questioning but acknowledging. "We were not informed you would be traveling today." And there was a subtle shift in his stance, the kind that came when someone realized they were no longer leading the situation but responding to it. Jada tilted her head slightly, not in disagreement, but in quiet observation, as if the statement itself was not important, only what it revealed. "That is usually the point," she replied, her voice calm, measured, carrying just enough weight to land without force. The agent swallowed, her earlier confidence now replaced by a growing awareness she could not fully name, her eyes flicking between Jada and the supervisor, searching for something to hold on to. "I was only following standard procedure," she said, her voice careful, controlled, but thinner now, lacking the firmness it once had. The supervisor did not immediately respond to her, and that silence spoke louder than any correction. Around them, the terminal continued to hold its breath. Conversations reduced to low murmurs, passengers glancing up at the board, then back at the scene unfolding near the counter. The words "corporate hold still" pulsed above them, steady, unwavering, like a decision already made. Jada adjusted the strap of her coat slightly. A small, practical movement that contrasted with the stillness around her, her attention returning briefly to the board, then back to the people in front of her. How long has the system been down? She asked, not as a complaint, not as a demand, but as a question directed at the structure itself. The supervisor glanced at his watch instinctively, then at the screen, calculating something quickly in his mind. Approximately 4 minutes, he answered, his tone precise, respectful. Jada nodded. Once, as if confirming a detail that aligned with something only she understood. And the passengers? She continued, her gaze shifting slightly to the line, to the families, the travelers, the individuals now caught in a pause they did not cause. The supervisor followed her line of sight, his jaw tightening slightly. They are waiting for clearance, he said, though the words sounded less certain as he spoke them. Jada's expression softened, not dramatically, but enough to suggest consideration rather than indifference. She took a small step forward, closing the distance between herself and the counter, not reclaiming space, but redefining it. Systems respond to signals, she said quietly, her voice steady, almost instructional, and people respond to how they are treated within those systems. The agent lowered her eyes for a brief second, the meaning landing deeper than she expected. A pause followed, longer this time, filled not with confusion, but with realization, slowly settling into place. The supervisor exhaled, then nodded, a subtle acknowledgement that the situation had moved beyond procedure. What would you like us to do, Miss Sterling? He asked, and this time there was no trace of authority in his voice, only deference. The question hung in the air, simple in structure, heavy in implication. Jada did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked once more at the board, at the halted flight, at the system waiting for instruction, then back at the agent, whose posture had shifted completely, shoulders slightly lowered, hands no longer defensive but open, uncertain. In that quiet exchange, something unspoken passed between them, something that had nothing to do with policies or lines or tickets. Jada's fingers moved again, not hurried, not dramatic, just precise, deliberate, as if she understood exactly how much pressure was needed and no more. The phone remained in her hand, but she did not look at it this time. She looked at the agent, and, when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before, but clearer. Start with respect, she said, and the simplicity of it settled deeper than any command ever could. The terminal remained still for one more breath, one more suspended second, as if waiting to see whether those words would be understood not just as instruction, but as change. The words did not echo, they settled, quiet but undeniable, and for a moment no one moved, as if the entire terminal needed time to understand something so simple had just shifted everything. The agent's lips parted slightly, then closed again, her shoulders lowering just enough to reveal the weight she had been carrying without realizing it. She glanced at the line, at the passengers she had been processing one by one, then back at Jada, and something in her expression changed, not forced, not rehearsed, but real. She started, then stopped, recalibrating her voice. I am sorry, ma'am. And this time the word carried meaning, not procedure. The supervisor remained still beside her, watching closely, not intervening, allowing the moment to unfold as it needed to. Jada held her gaze for a second, not evaluating, not judging, just present. And in that quiet exchange the tension that had filled the space began to loosen, just slightly. Behind them, the board still displayed corporate. Hold, the letters steady, waiting. A man in line exhaled softly, the kind of breath that comes when something invisible finally becomes clear. A woman adjusted her bag and straightened, no longer leaning in curiosity, but standing in awareness. The agent reached forward slowly, her hand hovering over the keyboard, then pausing, as if asking permission without words. The supervisor gave a small nod, barely noticeable, but enough. Her fingers moved again, but this time not with the same detached rhythm, each key pressed with intention, each action deliberate. We will begin boarding shortly, she said, her voice now steady, but different, grounded in something she had not used before. The system screen flickered once, then responded, lines of code updating, statuses shifting, as if the entire network had been waiting for more than just authorization. Jada lowered her eyes briefly, her thumb brushing lightly against the edge of her phone, not activating anything, just resting there. A Quiet acknowledgement that the next move did not need to come from her. Above them, the departure board hesitated, then changed. The words corporate hold fading slowly, replaced by a new message boarding resuming. The letters glowing brighter than before. A ripple moved through the terminal, not loud, but unmistakable. Conversations rising again, footsteps picking up, the natural rhythm returning. The supervisor exhaled, a subtle release, then turned slightly toward Jada. "Thank you," he said, and the words were simple, but carried the understanding of what had just been prevented, not just a delay, but something deeper. Jada gave a small nod. Nothing more. Her expression unchanged, her composure intact. The agent reached for a boarding pass, then paused, her hand shifting direction. She picked up Jada's ticket instead, holding it carefully this time, as if it mattered. "Ms. Sterling," she said, her voice respectful, steady. "You are welcome to board at your convenience." And there was no hesitation, no assumption, only clarity. Jada stepped forward, the soft roll of her carry-on. Following beside her, the sound grounding the moment back into something ordinary, something human. She accepted the ticket without a word, her fingers brushing lightly against the paper, then moved past the counter. The space that had once blocked her now opened without resistance. As she walked toward the gate, the people who had watched before now stepped aside naturally, not out of obligation, but recognition. No one spoke. But the silence felt different now, not tense, but aware. Behind her, the agent continued assisting the next passenger, her tone softer, more present, each interaction carrying a trace of what had just happened. The supervisor remained at the counter, watching Jada for a brief moment longer before turning back to the system. His posture changed, his attention sharper. Jada reached the gate entrance, the scanner ready, the path clear. She paused for just a fraction of a second, her gaze lifting once more to the board, now fully restored, flights moving again, schedules alive. Then she stepped forward, placing her ticket beneath the scanner, the soft beep sounding like a quiet conclusion. But as she moved through, her phone remained in her hand, and the screen, though dark, held a presence, a reminder that what had been done could just as easily be done again. And somewhere behind her, in the space she had left, the lesson lingered, not spoken, but impossible to ignore. The jet bridge hummed softly beneath Jada's steps, a low mechanical vibration that traveled through the floor and into the quiet rhythm of her stride, steady, unhurried, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The air shifted as she crossed the threshold, cooler, filtered, carrying the faint scent of recycled air and distant coffee, a contrast to the charged atmosphere she had just left behind. Inside the aircraft, the cabin lights glowed warm against rows of seats, overhead bins open like paused gestures, flight attendants moving with practiced efficiency, their smiles automatic but attentive. One of them looked up as Jada approached, her expression brightening slightly. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice smooth, professional, but something in her tone adjusted mid-sentence, subtle, almost instinctive, as if she sensed the presence of someone who required no explanation. Jada gave a small nod, her eyes scanning the cabin briefly, not searching for a seat, but observing, taking in the space the way she had taken in the terminal, aware of its structure, its flow, its quiet dependencies. A passenger in the aisle stepped aside to let her pass, offering a polite smile that carried a hint of curiosity, as if he had seen something unfold but did not yet understand it. Further down, a man adjusted his jacket, glancing up from his phone, then back again, the moment already dissolving into routine. Jada reached her seat, placing her carry-on gently into the overhead bin with a measured lift, the soft click of the latch closing echoing. Faintly above, she sat down, smoothing the edge of her coat, her phone resting loosely in her hand, screen still dark, still silent. Outside the window, ground crew moved in coordinated lines, signals exchanged, carts repositioned, the aircraft slowly returning to its expected rhythm. Inside, the cabin filled with the familiar sounds of settling passengers, seatbelts clicking, overhead bins closing, quiet conversations rising and falling. But beneath it all, there was a shift, something less visible, less audible, yet present. A flight attendant paused near the front, speaking softly into a headset, her eyes briefly scanning the cabin, then stopping for a fraction of a second on Jada before continuing, her tone more deliberate now, more precise. In the aisle, another attendant adjusted a passenger's bag with care, her movements slower, more attentive, as if each interaction carried a new awareness. Jada leaned back slightly in her seat, her gaze drifting toward the window, where the runway stretched out in long lines of light, guiding, waiting. Her reflection faintly appeared in the glass, layered over the distant ground, calm, composed, unchanged. She did not smile, did not frown, did not replay what had happened. She simply breathed, steady, even, as if the moment had already been placed where it belonged. The captain's voice came over the speaker, clear, controlled, announcing the final preparations for departure. A slight delay acknowledged, no explanation given. Passengers listened, accepted, adjusted, the system moving forward again. Jada's fingers shifted slightly around her phone, not activating it, not checking anything, just holding it. The weight of it familiar, unremarkable to anyone else, but integral in a way no one here could see. Across the aisle, a woman glanced at her, then looked away, then glanced again, something unspoken in her expression, not suspicion, not admiration, but recognition of a presence that did not need to announce itself. The cabin door closed with a firm, final sound, sealing the space, marking the transition from waiting to movement. The aircraft pushed back slowly, the engines beginning their low, steady build, vibrations deepening, growing. Jada closed her eyes for a brief moment, not in fatigue, but in stillness, allowing the noise, the motion, the entire system to pass through without resistance. And as the plane began to taxi, as the runway lights aligned ahead, as the structure of departure took hold once more, the silence she carried remained unchanged, a quiet center within the movement, a reminder that power did not need to be raised, did not need to be spoken, it only needed to be understood. The aircraft rolled forward with a steady hum, wheels tracing the runway lines as if following something already decided, the engines building in a low, controlled surge that pressed gently against the cabin walls. Jada opened her eyes as the motion deepened, not startled, not distracted, simply aware, her gaze drifting back to the window where the lights outside stretched into long glowing streaks, guiding the path ahead. The cabin had settled into that familiar quiet before takeoff. Conversations fading, phones tucked away, the shared anticipation of movement replacing earlier distractions. Across the aisle, the same woman who had glanced at her before adjusted her seatbelt slowly, her eyes lingering just a moment longer this time, not out of curiosity, but recognition, as if she had pieced together something. Without ever hearing it explained, a flight attendant moved down the aisle with measured steps, checking latches, offering brief nods, her voice softer than usual when she spoke, each interaction carrying a subtle care that had not been there before. Jada's phone rested lightly in her palm, her thumb tracing the edge without unlocking it, the screen remaining dark, inactive, yet present in a way that extended beyond its surface. The plane paused at the end of the runway, engines rising, a deep vibration filling the cabin, pressing into the seats, into the air itself, a moment of suspension before release. And in that moment, something shifted again, not outside, but within the system that surrounded it. In the cockpit, a light blinked once, then twice, a small notification appearing on the central display, not urgent, not alarming, but unexpected. The captain frowned slightly, adjusting his headset, reading the line again, then reaching for a control panel that responded slower than it should have. Hold on a second, he murmured to the co-pilot, his voice calm but focused, eyes scanning the display as another line appeared beneath the first, subtle, precise, unmistakably deliberate. Back in the cabin, nothing had changed yet, the passengers unaware, the rhythm continuing, the expectation of takeoff building with each passing second. Jada's gaze remained steady, her posture relaxed, but her attention sharpened, not reacting, but sensing, as if she recognized the pattern. Before it fully revealed itself, the engines maintained their low surge, but the forward motion did not come. Seconds stretched, just enough for a few passengers to shift in their seats, glancing toward the front, then toward the windows, sensing the delay without understanding it. The flight attendant near the front paused mid-step, her hand resting lightly on a seatback, listening to something through her earpiece, her expression tightening for just a fraction of a second before smoothing out. Again, Jada's phone vibrated once, a soft, controlled pulse against her palm, barely noticeable, but enough. She lowered her eyes, the screen lighting up briefly, a single notification displayed in clean, minimal text, no sound, no urgency, just information. She read it without reaction, her face unchanged. Then the screen dimmed again, returning to silence. In the cockpit, the captain exhaled slowly, then reached for the intercom, his voice steady but different now. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a brief operational hold. Please remain seated as we coordinate clearance." The words familiar, but the tone carrying something more precise, more intentional. The engines eased slightly, the tension in the cabin shifting, questions rising quietly, passengers exchanging looks, the certainty of departure replaced by a new, unexpected pause. Jada leaned back again, her head resting lightly against the seat, her eyes closing for a brief moment, not in frustration, not in impatience, but in stillness, as if the delay was not an interruption, but part of a sequence already understood. Around her, the system adjusted, recalibrated, waiting, and within that waiting, one truth remained, quiet, steady, undeniable, that the same silence which had once stopped everything outside was still here, still present, and still capable of doing it again. The pause stretched longer than anyone expected, not dramatic, not loud, just enough to unsettle the quiet confidence that had settled moments before. The engines remained in a low hum, no longer building, no longer pushing forward, as if the aircraft itself had chosen to wait. Inside the cockpit, the captain leaned slightly closer to the display, his brow tightening as another line appeared, not an error, not a failure, but a directive, clear and controlled, one that did not originate from the usual channels. "This is not a system delay," the co-pilot said under his breath, scanning the panel again, searching for something familiar, something explainable. The captain nodded once, slow, deliberate, then reached for a secondary channel, his voice steady but lowered. "Confirmed source of override," he said, each word measured. The response came back almost instantly, not from ground control, not from operations, but from a higher authorization tier, one rarely activated and never without intent. Back in the cabin, the shift was subtle but spreading, passengers no longer adjusting casually, now glancing more frequently, sensing that the delay had weight, that it was not routine. A man near the window leaned slightly forward, peering out as if the answer might be written on the runway, while a woman across the aisle checked her phone again, refreshing a screen that still offered no explanation. Jada remained still, her breathing even, her posture unchanged, her phone resting quietly in her hand as if it were nothing more than an ordinary object. But the awareness around her had deepened, not directed, not obvious, just present, like a current beneath the surface. The flight attendant at the front received another message through her headset, her eyes widening just slightly before she composed herself, her steps slowing as she turned, her gaze scanning the cabin until it landed, once again, on Jada. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then approached, her voice lower now, more careful. "Ma'am," she said softly, "the captain has been notified of an executive-level hold. We are working to resolve it as quickly as possible." Jada looked up at her, her expression calm, her eyes steady, offering no surprise, no urgency, only presence. "I understand," she replied, her tone even, neither confirming nor denying anything beyond those words. The attendant nodded, though it was unclear whether she felt reassured or simply acknowledged, then stepped back, her movements more deliberate as she returned to her position. In the cockpit, the captain removed his headset briefly, exhaling through his nose, the situation now fully clear to him in a way it had not been moments before. "We are not cleared to move," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else, his hand resting on the controls without engaging them. The runway ahead remained open, lights aligned, everything physically ready, yet the aircraft stayed exactly where it was, held not by force, but by decision. Jada's phone vibrated once more, softer this time. Almost like a confirmation rather than a signal. She glanced down, the screen illuminating briefly, displaying a single line that required no interpretation, no action, just acknowledgement. Her thumb hovered, then stilled, as if the next move was not about control, but choice. Around her, the tension had shifted again, no longer confusion, but realization slowly taking shape among those who paid attention. Those who felt the weight of something unseen guiding what should have been routine. The engines idled, the cabin lights steady, the silence no longer empty but filled with meaning. And in that quiet, suspended moment, it became clear to anyone willing to notice that the delay was not a problem to be fixed, but a message that had already been delivered. The silence held for one last breath, not empty, not uncertain, but full, like a decision waiting to be acknowledged rather than made. Inside the cockpit, the captain stared at the confirmation on his display, the authorization level unmistakable now, far beyond routine operations, far beyond anything that could be overridden without consequence. He